Welcome to Audible Stories. The Vagabond. Once upon a time in a tiny village, a group of children played together every day. They built snowmen and went sledding, built snow forts and tossed snowballs, laughing all the time. But one of the boys, named Percy, sometimes wandered off alone to see what he could see. Percy was a curious boy and looked in wonder at everything around him. Even in the middle of a snowball fight, he would sometimes look up at the clouds and wonder aloud, "How do you suppose the clouds are formed?" The other children teased him. "Percy is wondering about nonsense again." They laughed, but Percy only shrugged and wandered away to see what he could see. Not far from the village, a king lived in a great palace on top of a high hill. He might have had a beautiful view of the land, but a giant oak tree grew beside the palace. It was growing so quickly and nearly up to the clouds, that it soon blocked the light. The king decreed that someone must chop down the tree, but the task proved impossible. Every time someone began to chop off a branch, another one twice its length and thrice its breadth would grow in its place. The king had another problem, too. The nearest well was many miles away in the valley, and his servants were forever grumbling about the trek they had to take uphill carrying buckets of water. Often the water would freeze before they reached the palace. At last the king sent out a proclamation promising half of his kingdom to anyone who could solve his problems. Men came from far and wide to try their hand at chopping down the oak. But each time they chopped a branch, a larger one grew to replace it. And no matter how hard they tried and how quickly they ran up the hill, the water in the buckets froze before they could reach the palace. One day as the children were out playing, Percy heard the sound of a woodcutter deep in the woods. "I wonder who that is," he said, and the children laughed. "You wonder about the sound of a woodcutter, do you, Percy?" They tossed snowballs at him and went on with their games. But Percy was curious, and so he set off deep into the woods, following the sound. At long last he came to a river bank, and there he saw an axe busily chopping down a tree. But no one had held the axe. "Good day to you," Percy said. "I just wondered what you were doing." "I'm waiting for you to find me," the axe replied, and so Percy took the axe in his hands and stuffed it into his knapsack. With that he returned to his friends. "Did you find your woodcutter?" They laughed, but Percy only nodded and smiled. "I did," he said. The next day as the children were playing, they passed by a stream, and each of them stopped to take a drink. "I wonder where this stream begins?" Percy asked, and the children laughed again. "There you go wondering again," they said, and when they had finished drinking, they went on with their play. But Percy began to follow the stream, and after several miles he reached its end. There he found a giant walnut, with water bubbling out of its center. "I'm just wondering what you are doing," Percy said to the walnut. "I'm waiting for you to find me," the walnut answered, and so Percy stuffed a piece of walnuts from its hole, and put it in his knapsack. Then he returned to his friends. "Did you find the source of water?" the children asked. "It was running out of a hole," Percy answered them, and they all laughed again at their curious friend. One day the boys decided they would all travel together to the palace to try their hand at the king's oak tree. The oak had grown to 3 times its size. The boys gasped when they saw its girth. "I wonder if I could cut down this tree," Percy said, and the boys laughed. "Wonder away," they said, "but you're no match for this tree. Let us try first." One by one, the boys tried to chop down the tree, but as always the branch simply grew back, larger and stronger. At last Percy reached into his knapsack and pulled out his axe. He began to chop. All at once the axe went to work by itself, chopping so swiftly that the tree soon lay on the ground, chopped into pieces. The king was delighted, but before he could say a word, Percy reached into his knapsack again and pulled out the walnut. This he laid in the place where the tree once had stood. He pulled the moss out of its hole, and a stream began to flow. Now the servants were delighted too, and they lifted him upon their shoulders and proclaimed him their hero. "You shall be rewarded, son," the king proclaimed. "I wonder how many other wonders and wanderers are there in the world." Percy said to himself as everyone around him cheered. And this time no one laughed and teased at Percy. If you like the story, please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you for listening.